can!
It's over!
He's done it again! Unbelievable!
Oh, straight into the roof of the net.
Nice one.
Straight down the middle. So a good...
Hi, you're watching Firstpost with me, Rupha Ramani. Let's get started. Right on the show today, is it the end of the road for Shakib Al Hassan? Bangladesh's famous all-rounder and captain has not been selected for the Champions Trophy squad next month. Suspension, murder charge and now being forced out of the national squad. Did Bangladesh push out their own biggest sporting hero? The Los Angeles Wildfires is destroying the city. Voices are now emerging asking for the LA Olympics to be moved out. As the city continues to battle, we ask how will Los Angeles rise and heal in time for the Olympics 2028? And what goes into hosting such a mega event? An NBA star, Caitlyn, had a horrendous episode with a fan who turned out to be a stalker, going to the extent of tormenting her with messages containing sexual violence. Clark, who always stood up against societal issues, is now a victim herself and scared to even step out without a disguise. More on that in the show, but first, a look at the headlines on Sports 360. Starting with cricket, India captain Rohit Sharma joined domestic side Mumbai for a training session in the lead-up to the second half of the Ranji Trophy. The team is expected to train throughout the week at Wankhede before their match against Jammu Kashmir starting the 23rd of January. There is no confirmation yet if Rohit will play that match. On to tennis, former world number 1 Novak Djokovic made a winning start to his Australian Open campaign. After losing the first set, Djokovic beat America's Nishesh Basavareddy 4-6, 6-3, 6-4, 6-2. In another match, Nick Kyrgios' Grand Slam return was a short affair after the Aussie star lost 6-7, 3-6, 6-7 to Jacob Fernley in the first round itself. Following the defeat, Kyrgios said he might have played his last singles game in the Australian Open. Meanwhile, in the doubles draw, defending champion Rohan Bopanna has crashed out of the Australian Open after a first-round defeat. Bopanna and his partner Nicolas Barrientos lost in straight sets, 5-7, 6-7 to Spain's Pedro Martinez and Jama Munar. And summing it up with news from boxing, former world heavyweight champion Tyson Fury has announced his retirement. The 36-year-old previously announced a retirement in April 2022, but returned to the ring 6 months afterwards. The boxer has enjoyed 2 stints as heavyweight champion and holds an unprecedented record, 34 wins. Just a month ago, Fury lost his last fight to Alexander Usyk. Has the world seen the last of Shakib Al Hassan? The career of the Bangladeshi all-rounder and captain seems to have come to a very tragic end. It's been a chaotic year for Shakib. The turmoil and tension has now culminated with the BCB, the Bangladesh Cricket Board, not selecting him for the Champions Trophy next month. The last straw was in fact his bowling action being deemed illegal. Shakib's bowling was flagged off in England when he had appeared for Surrey in county championships, and right then he was banned from bowling in any of the competitive games thereon. He tried to overturn this but failed the initial tests that he took in England. After that, he even flew down to India in December to the southern state of Tamil Nadu, where he took an assessment test in Chennai's Sri Ramachandra Centre for Sports Science. He failed that too. His action is still illegal and he's disallowed from bowling, prompting selectors in Bangladesh from dropping him in what would have been his last ICC event. This, of course, created a flutter online, with many wondering if this is the last we all have seen of Shakib Al Hassan. The ICC Champions Trophy was the tournament Shakib was looking forward to. a tournament that would have been his swan song. Bangladesh has prevented that from happening. The country has not welcomed their own cricket star since former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's exit and downfall. Shakib Al Hassan's career was the collateral damage. He had contested the elections for Sheikh Hasina's party. He'd even won a seat. But the student uprising in Bangladesh and the anti-government sentiments that followed and drove her out of the country also meant Shakib couldn't return to his own nation. There were protests everywhere. His name made it to a murder charge sheet, and Shakib found it hard to even come back to his own country to play cricket. Shakib was set to play his last test for Bangladesh against South Africa some months back. That's where he would have bid his glorious test career goodbye. It was going to be a dream farewell, but even that was not possible. The protesters and the volatile environment surrounding him prevented his re-entry. The government and the board could not guarantee his safety once he flew in. Everyone distanced themselves from the matter, and that meant an abrupt and rude end to Shakib's test career. What's worse is what many would remember Shakib's last international appearance by. It would be the infamous dismissal of Sri Lanka's Angelo Matthews, who was timed out in a World Cup game against Bangladesh by none other than Shakib Al Hassan, resulting in the neighbours having a go at each other in an ugly spat that sparked a bitter rivalry. Shakib has always been cricket's controversial child. He thrived in it, in getting on the wrong side of the law, in playing dangerous with the rule makers, in showcasing his not-so-pretty side too. That's just how he was. Getting into fights and altercations was second nature, and he never shied away from a good face-off. And it's strange that as his career draws to an unpredictable and forced end, it's his country that has done him in. The very same country that he wanted to play in front of one more time. The same country he fought elections in, wanted to be lawmaker in. Ironical that his career seems to have been forced to a full stop. A sense of turmoil that he himself engaged with all his life. The year 2025 started off on a horrid note, with the American city of Los Angeles suffering one of the deadliest wildfires the world has seen. The wind-fed catastrophe has killed over 24 people and swept through 40,000 acres in the greater Los Angeles area. The infrastructure is in shambles, buildings crumbling, and the whole city in disarray. It's also affected the sporting system of the Hollywood city, putting a big question mark on the Olympics Games that LA is set to host in 2028. The city itself is on the brink of ruins and battling destruction. Two of the biggest leagues in the world, NBA and NFL, have faced the wrath of the wildfires. NBA sides LA Clippers and LA Lakers have had to delay their games. NFL team Los Angeles Rams had to relocate their wild card playoff game against Minnesota Vikings. Not just the leagues, former US Olympic swimmer Gary Hall Jr. lost all 10 of his Olympic medals along with his home and belongings to the fires. International Olympic Committee, or the IOC, has assured Hall of replacing his 10 medals. The IOC providing replicas of the Olympic medals would bring some respite to Hall, but the Olympic Committee itself is faced with a massive challenge ahead of them: the 2028 LA Olympics. Sure, the event is still over 3 years away, but given how deadly the wildfires have been, the question is, will the city be ready for this mega event? Because the city, once known for all the glamour and glitz of Hollywood, is burning, leaving more than 90,000 people displaced. People have resorted to looting, even in the evacuation zone. The city is already struggling to cope with the havoc the fires have caused, and this doesn't stop here. Strong winds are expected to spark new flames, threatening to reverse any progress firefighters might have made. So LA is tasked with a long, tough battle, plus the added pressure of hosting the 2028 Games, something that the organizers had been excited about when Paris Games had concluded. The city was thrilled to bring back the Olympics after 44 long years. They've been eager to organize their third Summer Games, but given the current condition, they have massive question marks ahead of them. Will it all be possible? Because hosting an event as big as the Olympics requires massive support. Let's talk finances first. Paris spent around $9 billion to host the events, and while this amount may sound too steep, it was still one of the most cost-efficient games, because Tokyo spent around $13 billion during the pandemic, and it still wasn't the most expensive edition. Brazil 2016 is the most expensive Olympic Games till date, having spent $20 billion to host it. Given the criticism Paris faced for lack of facilities, LA is expected to put up a grand show for its athletes and everyone else visiting, including the spectators. So clearly, there is a lot riding on the LA organizers and the city. When it comes to hosting an event like the Olympics, apart from the finances, it's also about the whole city. Every aspect of the city is involved in the games, and that needs to begin now. The heartening fact is that the city and the government are not battling the fires alone. Prominent faces, sports leagues have come out with donations to help people affected. But will all of this be enough, given the wildfires have ravaged Los Angeles? They need to rebuild structures, restore some of the iconic places, because Olympics isn't just about the sporting structures. The event is a means to bring the world to one place. Fans come to experience the city and the biggest sporting carnival. Just how iconic places like the Eiffel Tower, River Seine, Louvre all had a role to play, much like the sporting facilities and the events itself. And on top of all of this, the fight against voices who are asking the games to be moved out of LA is an additional pressure. So clearly there is immense pressure on LA and America to deliver, especially on President-elect Donald Trump. LA games are at stake, and given he will be the head of state at that time, Trump has a major task to undertake. This is the time for him to show the world if America can be great again under him, because his election motto was to keep America first. At stake here is also America's image as a sporting nation. Hosting an Olympics is huge, and the onus will be on him to pull this off. But can LA be ready for the 2028 Games? There's a very thin line between being a fan and being obsessed with a player, and more often than not, when that line is crossed, it's catastrophic. Women basketball and Indiana Fever's rising star Caitlyn Clark got a first-hand experience of that mania. One of Clark's fans turned stalker. The 55-year-old offender has also been charged for harassing Clark via messages that contained elements of sexual violence. And while the stalker has already been arrested, the basketball star is on high alert and is scared for her safety. What happened and how has this affected Caitlyn Clark? A report.
Caitlyn Clark is slowly becoming the face of women's basketball. The Rookie of the Year is one of the most prominent sports stars in the United States, and her impact goes beyond the basketball court. A recent study revealed that consumers are more likely to trust Clark while buying sports tech than her male counterparts. But the same Clark seems to have witnessed the dark side of this very ardent fan base. One of her supporters has been stalking her and threatening her with sexually violent messages. Michael Lewis, who hails from Texas, has been charged and arrested for stalking and harassing Clark. What's shocking is that Lewis is not a teenager who developed a sudden obsession for Clark. He is a 55-year-old man who indulged in this most despicable act, sending her messages that will make your skin crawl. Reports say many other messages were sexually violent in nature. What's concerning is, Lewis does not even consider this a crime. For him, it was a joke, and he says he didn't really intend to threaten Clark.
It's an imagination, fantasy type thing, and it's a joke, and it's nothing to do with threatening.
The messages continued even after the Indianapolis police warned the stalker last week. And when it didn't stop, Lewis was arrested and charged for the offences. He is scheduled to appear in court and could face up to 6 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. But will that help Clark overcome the mental trauma? Because following the episode, the 22-year-old star is on high alert. She even had to move about under disguise during public appearances. This horrifying episode has made an otherwise open and outspoken Clark reserved and cautious in public. It's very different for, say, cricket in India. Cricketers here are worshipped. They are superstars and are difficult to interact with. Public appearances are limited and done with utmost security. There are no private interactions possible. But in basketball or any of the American sports, it is easier to interact with the stars. They are often seen in public places. But this incident has rocked the ship, particularly for women athletes. If Lewis is given the prison term for his act, it will set an example for the rest. And once again, it will be Caitlyn Clark standing up for these issues, like she has in the past when she stood up for colored athletes in basketball, spoke about the ugly fan culture, and addressed the issue of racism in sport. While Clark addressed those other issues at her own will, this time she has been the victim, and that's tough to look past. Clark always stood up for pressing issues all her life, but now she is one of the victims who was terrorized, threatened, and is now concerned. Will the judicial system speak up for the athlete by punishing the accused?
Time for last serve. Runners in Russia are setting an example for the rest of the world. In the Yakutia region, dozens of runners braved temperatures as low as minus 50 degrees for a marathon through forests. Take a look. Heartwarming to see how sport continues to battle extremes. That does it here on First Sports. I'll of course see you again tomorrow. Till then, do take care. Bye-bye.